Welcome in to a new edition of the Illinicast, and yes, it does say basketball. We are going to be talking football. We have all day to talk about basketball tomorrow with the big game against number one Tennessee, but Illini football ended their season. Yes, they still have a bowl game against South Carolina, but let's just recap a little bit of what we saw this Illini football season, and it's got to be nothing but positives. I know we were one game away from the college football playoff, but we were essentially a really, really good team with two losses to Oregon and Penn State, and then that unfortunate loss to Minnesota. Sonny, what are your big time thoughts of this Illini football season? Happy, sad, indifferent? What are your thoughts?
I don't know how it could be anything but happy. I thought I was the optimistic one. I had Illinois winning 7 games this year, and somehow they plowed through that, winning 9 games. I completely underestimated them this season. It's one of those where, and let's be honest, next year we could possibly be even better. And, especially if we have a returning Luke Altmaier, which I'm sure we're going to talk about shortly. And, a lot of our starters should be returning for next year's season. So Brett Bielema's got that arrow pointing up with the Illini football. And that's all I've been asking for the last 10 years.
And you look at the schedule for next year. You have USC at home, you have Washington on the road, and you have Ohio State as well on the schedule. But that's only one playoff team compared to what it looked like this year, where you have 2 playoff teams on your schedule and a game against a Kansas team who really came about at the final stretch as a run of their season. So I look at this line of football season and just think, like, yes, were there that missed opportunity, that one major missed opportunity? Yes, but I feel like you did get lucky with the Rutgers win and Pat Bryant calling game at the very end. So I think the record is what it should have been. There was no stretch run where you're like, man, Illinois should have 3 or 4 losses from this. And there wasn't a stretch run where you were like, man, Illinois should have gone undefeated. So I feel like the cream rose to the top, and Illinois found its level at the very end of the season, and it was 3 losses, which credit to Brett for the recruiting that he did in the transfer portal. I complained about him 2 years ago by not really going full bore into the portal outside of getting Luke Altmaier, and this year the additions that he did make, like J.C. Davis and Melvin Priestley, and those kind of additions meant the world to this Illini football program. And, of course, that's not even mentioning Zachary Franklin, who is a phenomenal wide receiver. Yes, he was the number 2 wide receiver because of the emergence of Pat Bryant, but the transfer portal did Illinois wonders this year, and credit to Brett Bielema and his staff for finding the right guys, getting them into the right holes.
Yeah, Brett recognized very early that we weren't going to go dollar for dollar against some of the top programs in the country and be able to compete. And so he, and I'm sure his staff, all kind of sat down and mapped out a plan on how can we extract and bring in the most amount of talent here to Illinois. It's very much a Moneyball type of situation. And, they found a route. Basically, I think they've, for the most part, focused on guys who are producing at possibly lower levels and counting on it to translate into once they reach Illinois, Champaign, and play in the Big Ten. I think they're kind of shying away from the former 5-star, former 4-stars who maybe can't break the 2 deep at whatever big programs that they're at. And maybe that has something to do with, those guys possibly still coming with a bigger NIL price tag. And so these guys who are coming from lower levels, their main focus might be, hey, can you get me to the NFL? And really, there's very few people who've proven to be able to develop for the NFL better than Brett Bielema.
Absolutely. And you look at what this means for the program as a whole in the future, what this season did. Number one, it allowed the NIL coffers to open up a little bit more. I look at North Carolina and their shift into football with Bill Belichick and maybe not wanting to be that basketball school because they know that football is going to be the driving force for basketball to be successful. And I think Illinois is going to realize that after this great 9-3 season, that with football, you are going to be able to build so much more through your whole athletic teams because that's what's going to bring in a lot of the revenue for your university. And number two, what this does is this shows that to recruits and to transfers, if you come to Illinois, you can be successful. You can get your name called in New York City or wherever the city of the draft is going to be in the next few years. You're going to hear your name called in a round, and you're going to be on an NFL roster. And this just is so refreshing to talk about of the overwhelming positives of a Illini football season going into next year, rather than like, all right, what do we got to do with this coordinator? What do we got to do with this position coach? It's so nice to think of the positive ramifications of a Illini football season.
Yeah, I mean, usually at this point, we're worried about, you know, the stability of the program. You know, other players are like, hey, you know, that Illinois head coach is not even going to be there. That Are you sure you want to commit the next X amount of years? Right now, we're one of the most stable programs in the entire conference. You know, Purdue just had a recent head coach firing. Things are going crazy in Nebraska, at Wisconsin. A lot of the programs that we kind of, you know, compete with directly, Michigan State, a lot of their fans weren't really excited about Jonathan Smith's first year out up there. So it's one of those. Illinois seems kind of like a safe destination. We're a safe destination where you're going to get developed. You're going to get paid here. You know, it's not like we're not paying out the NIL, maybe just not at the highest levels, but I don't think we're seeking out the same type of players that the Georgias are going after, the Ohio States are going after. So, you know, it's just nice because very seldom have we had this opportunity to like be proud of this football program. You know, usually we're just kind of begging for scraps and trying to get, you know, players who are otherwise offered by MAC teams to come play football in Champaign. Right now, we seem to be a destination. You can kind of see it with the type of players that we're bringing in right now, you know, in the transfer portal. These are guys who, after us, have visits at Georgia, at Ole Miss, you know, like basically the top programs. And it's just nice that for once, Illinois is one on a pretty good, solid foundation in the Big Ten Conference.
I mean, this is going to be the second consecutive year. Like, I'm forecasting a little bit because you never know what the college football landscape can truly bring. You're 97% sure that you're going to bring back Luke Altmaier to be the quarterback of the Illini. You have your offensive coordinator returning, possible quarterback, defensive coordinator returning, and again, head coach. Those are the core four that you need to be successful in college football. And for the second consecutive year, you have an opportunity to bring your core four back in this crazy landscape of college football where things can change on a dime. That is mightily impressive, not only for Brett Bielema, but it's impressive for Josh Whitman and the vision that he has for Illini athletics. So I am just so ecstatic that static is going to be the name of the game in Champaign for at least another year for Illini football. And that's just mind-blowing that Illinois would be, like you said, one of the more stable programs in the entire Big Ten.
So we did have some news when it comes to football. Donovan Leary, obviously the backup quarterback, had decided to enter the transfer portal and seek out, you know, maybe a different football team. Austin, I'm just curious what your thoughts on that were.
I mean, backup quarterback is important. I think this year was one of the only seasons I've seen in my lifetime where the backup quarterback hasn't had to take a snap or take too many snaps. I don't know if there was like some garbage time backup quarterback time this year. I'd have to go back in the box scores. But you look at what the backup quarterback is for Illinois, this is one of the outliers. So, yes, it's nice to have like a Donovan Leary as your backup, but the transfer portal exists where you can get a starting MAC quarterback or a starting quarterback from a very low conference that just wants to be a part of a winning conference and a winning team that can be your backup. So I'm not too scared of losing Donovan Leary. And you have Trey Petty from Starkville, Mississippi, there still as well. So I don't see it as too big of a loss, but it's kind of the way of the jungle. A backup quarterback thinks he can start elsewhere. We'll see what offers kind of align for Donovan Leary.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where I would have loved to have him back especially he's played 3 years here, and you understand like it probably wasn't an easy decision. He's played 3 years now, under Barry, and I'm sure he just would have loved an opportunity to start. He just can't here. Especially it looks like, as you mentioned, it looks like Luke will be returning. And I think this is as clear a sign as any that Luke is returning. I'm sure the staff has had these conversations with Donovan, and if the staff had concerns, I'm sure they would have relayed it to him and like, hey, it doesn't. Luke might be priced out for us, so that you might have an opportunity to stay. And so at that point, Donovan might have incentive to at least stick this portal out a little bit longer. But it looks to me like, the opposite conversation might have happened. And I can't blame Donovan at all. He's done everything we've asked for. And if that kid wants to be able to take some snaps and go start somewhere, then he's only got 2 seasons left, right? If he has professional aspirations and he just wants to play college football. It's hard to blame a kid like him. Obviously his brother was a star in college football. I'm sure he's been itching to go at it. So yeah, I mean, no hard feelings towards the Leary family. I do think that Illinois, I like Trey Petty, and I know the staff likes Trey Petty, but I think I talked about this on yesterday's Locked On Illini Rapid Reaction. I think next year's team could be a top 25 preseason team, and I just don't know with all the starters we have coming back. I think I counted like 14 potential starters returning on next year's team. I just don't know that you want to count on being super lucky again with Luke and risk that if he were to get hurt, I would think you would want at least one veteran back there. It's very similar to the John Paddock situation, just a guy who has experience throwing the football at a very high level, probably not at the P4 level, but regardless, just someone with a little bit more experience before you want to go to a guy like Trey Petty when, next year, I mean, you kind of hinted at this before, the schedule doesn't look too intimidating. It could potentially be a 9-10 win season again.
And you never know if there's going to be an Art Sikowski situation with another program and another guy like that. Art Sikowski was the starting quarterback at Rutgers, lost his starting position, and came to Illinois because he just thought it was a friendlier environment to be in. And I think that's one thing that Brett and Barry and Aaron Henry have done is to be a culture staff of good vibes and vibes that are just going to be like, hey, we're going to work hard and have fun. That's kind of our mantra right now, and it's kind of worked for Illinois. Like, there hasn't been too many moments of like guys complaining about the culture at Illinois. It's always been like, oh, I love Brett. Barry Lunny has been great to me. The only things you've seen is just like, hey, I'm not getting playing time, so I need to go somewhere else. That's really the only reason why people have transferred out. So there very well could be a situation like an Art Sikowski come in to be a backup, and that would be ultra vital for Illinois just to have that built-in knowledge of how to read a football field instead of like just on the scout team. So I think that's going to be vital for Illinois to get. Philip, he comments and says, fix the O-line, keep Luke upright, and a certain Alabama transfer would help. That is right. Former East St. Louis offensive lineman, former Alabama offensive lineman entered the transfer portal. I'm blanking on the name, Sonny. You can help me there. But
McVay.
Yes, Miles McVay. There we go. What a beast he is, like just in terms of body structure. He reminds you of a little bit of a Jason Peters. I'm not saying he's going to be a Hall of Fame tackle, of course, but just the body style is very similar to what Jason Peters brings. And if he's able to come to Illinois to join his fellow high school teammates of Brandon Henderson and Priestley, that would be a unbelievable stroke of luck and a stroke of genius by Brett Bielema and his staff to bring a guy like that in to add continuity to that offensive line that loses J.C. Davis, who's probably going to be a third-round pick or something along those lines come April/May. So that would be a huge guy to get in this transfer portal class.
And it's tough because, obviously you'd slide him at left tackle. Left tackle is arguably, maybe just behind quarterback, the most expensive position to fill on your roster in this new NIL era. And this wouldn't be just a 1-year gap, right? Like J.C. Davis was. I mean, we hit a home run with J.C. Davis, but McVay still has, I believe, 3 seasons ahead of him. So, like, that's one less thing for us to worry about. And if anything, if he leaves after 2 years, it's probably because he's showing up in NFL mock drafts. As you mentioned, he's a big boy. He's got the perfect size to play at the next level, even. And so it's just one of the biggest concerns, and Philip nailed it. We want to keep Luke Altmaier upright because he's our best chance to, either repeat 9 wins next season or maybe even go beyond that, and maybe sniff the college football playoff next season. And the best way to do that is make sure his blind side's covered.
Exactly. And there are a few more positions that you would like to fill. I think left tackle is one. Backup quarterback, we addressed that. Wide receiver, you're going to have to replace Pat Bryant and Zachary Franklin, which is not an easy task. That's probably the best wide receiver duo that Illinois has had in a long, long time. I'd have to go back and research on some other duos that would even match, but that's a position of need right there. I know that they had that Kentucky wide receiver visit from the transfer portal. So if Illinois were to get him, that would stabilize that wide receiver room a lot, and then you can just get some guys that fit Barry Lenny's system outside of that number one position. You get a guy maybe that's better in the slot. You get a guy that can expand the defense on some of those deep routes that Luke Altmaier likes to throw. That's kind of the next stretch of what you need. And obviously there's a guy in the locker room right now that can help out that receiving room, and that's Malik Elzy. He is a guy that has a lot of star power coming out of high school in Chicago area, and he has yet to live up to the hype, I think, of what he initially thought what we initially thought Malik was going to bring. But now with the opportunity, his tutelage under Pat Bryant and Zachary Franklin, I think he's a guy that can really help out this receiving room where you might get an addition just by progression in a way.
Yeah, I'm very curious to watch the bowl game just to see, with Pat Bryant not playing, which I completely understand, and I think his reasoning is justified. I'm very curious to see if Malik is one of the main guys who's replacing Pat. Because, again, we're kind of spoiled here when it comes to being an Illini fan right now. You talked about, I don't know when was the last time we had two really, really talented wide receivers like that. Funny enough, it might have been last year. Maybe not quite at that level, but, we had the Isaiah Williams and Casey Washington last year. This year, we've somehow upgraded from that. We thought we were going to take a step down last year. So again, this kind of speaks to just where Brett has our program. But yeah, you're talking about Kapka Jones, Hank Beatty's really stepped up. Colin Dixon has done really well in that wide receiver room. I agree with you. We definitely need one veteran, a guy where Luke knows he can just kind of trust a little bit more. But I'm going to be very curious. I hope Elzy, sticks around. He's obviously one of the main names that you hear about. Maybe he's going to look for a different opportunity somewhere else. But that kid is super talented, and I do think that hopefully, just watching the Pat Bryant, process, he can kind of envision himself in it and see that there is a role for him in the next couple seasons. And, he kind of grabs the brass ring as opposed to tries to look for an opportunity elsewhere.
I mean, that's the big bugaboo of the transfer portal is it almost flies in the face of logic at times with guys that make their decisions. And of course, they're under 21 years old. It's not going to be the most sane choices in the world. I know they have agents now that can help guide their decision-making process, but you see opportunities just right there, and then some guys just don't see it because they've had such a bad time with their own production in years past that they don't think they can cross that threshold and go into that next era of their college career by being a starter, by being a main focal point on the offense. And that's kind of the challenge of these college coaches anymore is to erase the doubt of some of these guys that you just see as the next guy on the depth chart, but they've been below some guys so long that they just think, well, I got to transfer out to get an opportunity.
What about the defensive side? I feel like we definitely need help on the defensive line mainly, which again is just unfortunate because that's a position that costs so much money. I think we're kind of okay on the secondary front, but I don't know. Have you heard any names on the defensive line?
I know the defensive lineman from Wisconsin is taking a visit
Oh, yeah.
to Illinois.
Awesome.
Yes, and then there was a defensive tackle. I hate that I can't remember his name from a group of five school that is going to visit Illinois. Big guy, defensive tackle style. Um, so yeah, there are some options out there for the defensive line. I'd honestly like to see linebacker addressed just a little bit, just to add some depth because once Rosiak got injured, it did seem like that the linebacker crew did kind of take a little bit of a step back there. So I'd like to see linebacker addressed a little bit more in terms of depth. But the secondary is I have such strong faith in what the secondary has and the development from Coach Henry. I mean, it's just been unbelievable to see how those guys have developed. There has been some lulls, yes, against the top-notch competition like Penn State and Oregon, but you'll always have that whenever it becomes an athlete battle. But in terms of Illinois versus their true like tit for tat competitors, the defensive backs did a wonderful job this year.
Yeah, it's nice, and hopefully we can convince Xavier to come back. You know, it's nice to see he did get the AP All Big Ten first team along with Pat Bryant. You know that room is talented. You know, it looks like we talked about how many hits and doubles and home runs we've hit in the transfer portal. It does look like Terrence Brooks was not one of those. One of those guys who I'm surprised we haven't heard already about him entering the transfer portal, but maybe he's just waiting for a final conversation, or you know maybe he's just trying to figure out what his next destination is going to be. But yeah, the secondary seems okay. Linebackers also, I agree. I think we had one of the worst linebacking rooms in the Big Ten Conference last year. It's nice to bring in a guy like Grant Bierman. You know that late flip that we had from Purdue. So
Mm-hmm.
you don't necessarily want to play a freshman that many snaps, but I do foresee, you know, a situation where he's going to at least be a part of a rotation in the linebackers room. But yeah, for me, the lines are probably the biggest concerns when it comes to transfer portal. Getting a veteran wide receiver in there, and then more depth in the linebacking room. I agree with that.
Let's go through some Big Ten teams and see if you think Illinois is more stable than or less stable than. So let's start at the top. These are going to be pretty easy. Ohio State. Is Illinois more stable than Ohio State?
Well, I mean, stable in the sense that they might be. Oh, I guess no. They announced that they're not going to fire Ryan Day. They're obviously clearly in a different level than Illinois. I don't know if I'm answering the question properly.
No, you are right. I think Oregon and Penn State are the other easy ones. And then you get into Indiana. Is this a one-hit wonder for Indiana, or is this a situation where it's going to be a thorn in the side of Illinois, and we're going to see Illinois get butt whipped in this Big Ten game next year? Is it going to be like a 45-20 game, and we're going to be like, okay, Indiana is legit, or is this just a one-hit wonder?
I'm in wait and see mode. Quite honestly, for me, it's one of those. Last year, when Northwestern had the year that they had, I was like, you know what, this is a Disney movie. Let's see what happens after a full year. You know, he's got to hire his own staff. You know, the players, we'll see who sticks and who leaves. And then and it's kind of the same thing with Indiana and Signetti. Obviously, he's a good coach, but he brought in a lot of his players from his previous stop. And a lot of those players are not going to be there this year, including their quarterback. So for me, I'm not ready to crown him quite yet. I'd probably say Illinois is in a better position than Indiana.
I do too, and I think it's because of the realization, like I talked about earlier, that Illinois and football matter a lot, and Indiana basketball will always reign supreme. So it's going to be interesting to see what the NIL dollars and the transfer portal dollars look like for Indiana this year. So I am intrigued by that. So I think Illinois just gets that realization, like Illinois and North Carolina have had this offseason. We'll see if Indiana has that same type of mentality. Let's go to Iowa.
Yeah, I mean that's probably the most stable program in the conference.
Yeah, Nebraska.
They are not more stable than us. No,
No.
yeah, everything going on with Matt Rule, their defensive coordinator left, their defensive line coach left. A lot of guys on the defensive end leaving. Definitely not.
Yeah, I mean, I think Nebraska is the quote unquote sexy program of the Big Ten, but go into that personality if you're talking about dating. That personality is just so toxic that you're like, man, this is not sustainable at all. So that's where Nebraska is. And then let's talk about Michigan, University of Michigan. There we go.
Stable is like the operative word here, right? Obviously, they've got a lot of positive momentum right now, bringing in Underwood, and looks like they've really opened up that war chest when it comes to NIL. But how much do you trust that Sharon Moore is a very good head coach? But maybe it's a question of like how much does it matter? Like if they have this many big time backers, if Sharon Moore doesn't perform next year, maybe they just cut loose early. They'll just pay the buyout and bring in a top notch head coach. I think overall Michigan is still Michigan, and they did just win a national championship the year prior. So I'll probably say they're still a little bit more stable.
All right, and I know we got to wrap up, Sonny. So I'll finish with our football themed episode. Does a Big Ten school win a national title this year?
I think so. I think this is the year, and my prediction is going to be Ohio State. I think this would be one of those years where everyone is, kind of making fun of that program right now. Ryan Day and Ohio State clearly have a Michigan problem, but Michigan is not a team that's going to be in this playoff bracket. I think it would be so typical of sports and the beauty of sports if all of a sudden, after that Ohio State embarrassing loss to Michigan, everyone basically counts them out. They come back and they kind of complete the circle, and they actually, they lost to Oregon, but it was a game that came to pretty much the final snap. I think those two are clearly the two best teams, and I think just for the sake of the sports story, the Buckeyes are my prediction to win it all this year. I have them plus 800 to win it all too, so I do have a little rooting interest at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like last year's Illinois basketball where we lost to Northwestern in that overtime game, and it's like, oh my gosh, but you don't remember it because of that Elite Eight run going to all the way losing to UConn. So I think it'd be a very similar situation, but it's only magnified because Ohio State Michigan is a top two rivalry in all of college sports. So I am intrigued to see the Ohio State fans like mind f of what happens of losing to Michigan but winning a national title. That'll be hilarious to see those mindsets of those Ohio State fans. But yeah, it's a great episode talking football, and we will be back tomorrow afternoon before the Illini Tennessee game. Number 1 versus I think unranked still, or
we should be ranked next week hopefully, but yeah, currently we're unranked.
Yeah, so we'll be here at 2:30 to talk about that game and all sorts of Illini basketball topics, including Kasparis Yakachonis' arrival on the scene and Ben Hummerkaus' struggles. We'll talk about it all. Sonny, thank you for a great episode, and we'll see you tomorrow.
All right, make sure you guys hit the like button on your way out.
Yes, like, share, and subscribe to Illinicast, and of course, our friends at Armchair Illini, like and share and subscribe to them over on the various social media platforms. Sonny, great episode, ILL.
I.